My name is Juliet. I'm 32 years old, and I woke up at 3 in the morning thinking I was going to die. The pain in my abdomen felt like someone was twisting a knife inside me, over and over. I crawled to my phone, hands shaking, and called my mom. Voicemail. I called my dad. Voicemail. My sister Claire, my brother Nathan. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. As I dialed 911 with trembling fingers, I remembered where they all were. Hawaii. Sipping cocktails on a beach while I lay alone on my bathroom floor, appendix rupturing inside me. The family vacation I'd paid for but couldn't attend. They knew I was home. They just didn't care enough to answer. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, or if you've ever felt abandoned by the people who should love you most, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about surviving family drama and finding your strength. Trust me, what comes next will shock you. You won't believe how far my family went to make me the villain in their perfect vacation story. Let's get into it. 3 weeks before that nightmare morning, my life looked completely different. I was excited, genuinely happy, sitting at my parents' dining table while my mother Diane spread brochures across the polished wood surface. The Hampton family vacation to Hawaii. It was all we'd talked about for months. My father Roland had found an incredible resort deal. My sister Claire couldn't stop researching the best snorkeling spots. And my brother Nathan had already bought a new underwater camera. I'd paid my share 2 months earlier, $2,500, money I'd carefully saved from my marketing job. This was supposed to be our trip, the 5 of us making memories under tropical skies. Then my boss Garrett called me into his office on a Wednesday afternoon, and my world tilted sideways. He's the kind of boss who smiles while delivering bad news, and that day his smile was particularly tight. There was a major client presentation, he explained, scheduled for the exact week of my vacation. The client specifically requested me because I'd handled their account for the past year. Garrett leaned back in his leather chair and said the words that would change everything. This presentation could make or break the account. It was mandatory. I had to be there. When I mentioned my family vacation, already paid for, already planned down to the last detail, he simply shrugged. Work comes first, he said. That's what being a professional means. I drove to my parents' house that evening with a knot in my stomach, practicing how to break the news. My mother was in the kitchen. Claire was sprawling on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Nathan was playing video games in the corner, and my father was reading the newspaper in his armchair. They all looked so content, so excited about the upcoming trip. I took a deep breath and told them I couldn't come. Work had scheduled something unmovable. I'd tried everything to get out of it, but my job was on the line. The silence that followed felt like falling into cold water. My mother's face transformed from warm to ice in seconds. She set down the wooden spoon she'd been holding with deliberate slowness. Well, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. I suppose work is obviously more important than family. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just sighed. A long exhale that communicated everything he didn't say out loud. Claire rolled her eyes so dramatically I could see it from across the room. Nathan paused his game long enough to shake his head before returning to his screen. I tried to salvage the situation. I'd still paid my share, I reminded them. Maybe they could use it to upgrade something, make the trip even better. Or maybe I could get refunded and they could adjust the reservations. My father finally lowered his newspaper and looked at me over his reading glasses. The money was already spent, he said flatly. Everything was booked based on 5 people. They couldn't just change it now. When I suggested maybe I could fly out for the last 3 days, take time off after the presentation, join them for the end of the trip, Claire actually laughed. It was a harsh sound, nothing like her usual giggle. Don't bother, she said without looking up from her phone. You've already ruined it. There's no point in showing up for the scraps. My mother nodded in agreement, turning back to her cooking as if I'd ceased to exist. Your sister is right, she said to the pot she was stirring. We had our hearts set on all 5 of us being together. Now it's just going to be constant questions about where you are. How do we explain that you chose a work meeting over your own family? The guilt settled over me like a wet blanket. I tried to explain again that I didn't have a choice. that I could lose my job if I skipped this presentation, that I'd tried everything. But their faces remained cold, closed off. Nathan finally spoke up, still not looking at me. "You always have a choice," he said quietly. "You just made yours." That night I went home and cried into my pillow, feeling like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. In the days leading up to their departure, I tried to stay connected. I sent cheerful messages to our family group chat, asked about their packing, shared articles about things to do in Hawaii. My messages were met with one-word responses or silence. When I suggested we video chat so I could see them off at the airport, my mother texted back that they'd be too busy. The morning they left, I woke up early thinking maybe they'd stop by or at least call to say goodbye. Instead, I saw their airport selfie on social media, all four of them grinning at the camera, carrying surfboards and wearing matching Hawaiian shirts I didn't know they'd bought. The caption read, "Family adventure begins." Not a single mention of me, as if I'd never been part of the plan at all. I threw myself into work with manic energy, determined to make the sacrifice worth it. The presentation consumed every waking hour. I rehearsed until I could recite it in my sleep, perfected every slide, anticipated every possible question. The day of the presentation arrived, and I delivered flawlessly. The clients were impressed. Garrett nodded approvingly, and we secured the account. It should have felt like victory. Instead, I sat alone in my office afterward, staring at my phone, waiting for my family to ask how it went. The family group chat was full of activity, just not about me. Beach sunset photos, tropical drinks with little umbrellas, videos of sea turtles swimming in crystal-clear water. My mother posted a picture of the four of them at a luau flower lace around their necks with the caption, "My babies, my whole world." I wasn't in the world anymore, apparently. That night I ordered takeout and ate it alone in my apartment, scrolling through their vacation updates, feeling the distance between us grow with every posted photo. I told myself it would be fine once they got home. We'd laugh about the misunderstanding. They'd see I hadn't had a choice. Everything would go back to normal. I had no idea how wrong I was. I had no idea that within 72 hours, I'd be fighting for my life while they continued posting paradise pictures without a second thought about whether I was even alive. 2 days after my family left for Hawaii, I started feeling off. It was subtle at first, a dull ache in my lower right abdomen that I dismissed as stress or maybe bad takeout from the Chinese restaurant down the street. I took some antacids and went to bed early. The third day, the pain sharpened. Every time I moved, it felt like something was pulling inside me, but I convinced myself it was just my body reacting to the tension of the past weeks. I'd been pushing myself too hard, not sleeping enough, barely eating. Of course I didn't feel well. I just needed rest. By day 4, I knew something was seriously wrong. I woke up at 3 in the morning and the pain had transformed from uncomfortable to unbearable. It felt like my insides were tearing apart, like some animal was clawing its way through my abdomen. I stumbled to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. Sweat poured down my face. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone. That's when I started calling. My mother first, because she'd always been the one I called when I was sick, even as an adult. Her phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. I tried my father. Same thing. Claire's phone didn't even ring, just went straight to voicemail like she'd turned it off. Nathan's did the same. Panic rose in my throat. I tried to think clearly through the haze of pain. They were in Hawaii. It was late there too, they were probably sleeping. But I needed someone. I scrolled through my contacts with trembling fingers. My best friend Mira was visiting her family in Oregon. My cousin Maxine had just had twins and was drowning in diapers and exhaustion. My colleague Derek might come, but it was 3 in the morning and we weren't that close. I called an Uber because I knew I couldn't drive. Couldn't even stand up straight. The driver took one look at my gray face and sweaty clothes and asked if I needed to go to a hospital. I nodded, unable to speak through the waves of pain. The emergency room was bright and cold. A nurse rushed me back immediately when she saw how I was doubled over, clutching my side. Within 20 minutes, a doctor was pressing on my abdomen, asking questions I could barely focus on. When did the pain start? Has it gotten worse? Any fever? He ordered blood tests and a CT scan. I lay on the examination table, staring at the fluorescent lights, trying to breathe through the pain. The doctor returned with a grave expression that made my heart drop. "Your appendix has ruptured," he said carefully. "This is life-threatening. The infection is spreading. We need to operate immediately. Within hours, you could develop sepsis." I heard the words, but they felt distant, like he was talking about someone else. A nurse handed me forms. Emergency contact information. I wrote my mother's number with a shaking hand. They called her. No answer. They tried my father. No answer. I asked them to try my sister, my brother. Voicemail. Voicemail. The nurses exchanged glances that made me feel even more alone than I already was. I grabbed my phone, ignoring the nurse who told me to stay still while they prepped me for surgery. My fingers fumbled with the family group chat. I typed out a message, deleting and rewriting it 3 times before hitting send. "In hospital. Emergency surgery. Ruptured appendix. Please call." I watched the message show as delivered, then as read. The 3 dots appeared, indicating someone was typing. Then they disappeared. No response came. Minutes ticked by. The surgical team was ready for me. I kept checking my phone obsessively. The family chat showed new activity. My sister had posted a photo of a beach at sunset, the sky painted in oranges and pinks. "Paradise found." Shed written. My mother had commented with a heart emoji and "best vacation ever." Nathan shared a video of himself surfing, wiping out and laughing as he tumbled into the waves. Not one word about my message. Not one acknowledgement that their daughter, their sister, was about to go into emergency surgery for a life-threatening condition. I called Nathan's phone one more time, desperation making my voice crack. This time he answered. The background noise was loud, music and laughter and the clink of glasses. "What?" he said, his tone irritated. I could barely hear him over what sounded like a beach bar. "I'm in the hospital," I said, trying not to cry. "I need emergency surgery. My appendix ruptured. I'm really scared." There was a pause. I heard him say something to someone else. Laughter in response. Then his voice came back, clear and cold. "You're at a hospital, right? They'll handle it. We're kind of in the middle of something here, Jules. It's our vacation." I felt like head punched me in the stomach. "Nathan," I said, my voice breaking. "I could die." The words hung in the air. He sighed, a sound of deep annoyance. "You're being dramatic. People get their appendix out all the time. It's routine. Look. Well, call you after the surgery, okay? We're at this really great bar, and I don't want to miss it. Tell the doctors to take good care of you." He hung up before I could respond. I lay there, staring at my phone, tears streaming down my face. The nurse who'd been setting up my IV noticed. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag read Rosa. "Honey," she said softly, "where's your family?" I couldn't answer. The words stuck in my throat. She squeezed my hand. "You're going to be okay," she said. "We're going to take good care of you." That small gesture of kindness from a stranger broke something inside me. I started sobbing, ugly crying in a way I hadn't since I was a child. Rosa held my hand until they wheeled me into the operating room. The anesthesiologist told me to count backward from 10. As the medication pulled me under, my last conscious thought was that my family had chosen drinks and laughter over knowing if I'd survive the night. They'd chosen their vacation over my life. And somewhere deep in my fading consciousness, I understood that something fundamental had broken between us. Something that might never be repaired. The last thing I saw before the world went black was the clock on the wall showing 3:47 in the morning. In Hawaii, it was 9:47 at night. Prime time for beach bars and tropical cocktails and family bonding without the inconvenient sister who'd chosen work over them. I woke up in the recovery room with a throat raw from intubation and pain radiating from my abdomen despite the medication. The ceiling tiles above me were beige with little holes in them. I counted them while I waited for my brain to fully emerge from the anesthesia fog. Nurse Rosa appeared beside me, checking my vitals with practiced efficiency. "Surgery went well," she said warmly. "You're going to be sore for a while, but you made it through. The doctor will be by soon to explain everything." I nodded, or tried to, and immediately regretted moving my head. The room tilted. Rosa helped me sip water through a straw. My first fully conscious thought was to check my phone. She handed it to me with a sympathetic look that told me she already knew what I'd find. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No calls, no voicemails, no text messages asking if I was okay. The family group chat was active though. Very active. My father had posted a photo of the resort at sunrise, the pool empty and peaceful, palm trees casting long shadows. "Another day in paradise," had written. My mother commented, "Grateful for this time with my babies." Claire shared a selfie of herself in a flower crown from the luau the night before. Nathan posted a picture of his breakfast, some elaborate tropical fruit arrangement. I scrolled through it all with a numb detachment. They were having the time of their lives. Id survived emergency surgery alone, but they were concerned with documenting their perfect family vacation. I typed a message with shaking hands. "Surgery went okay. Feeling awful. Wish you were here." I stared at it for a long moment before hitting send. The message was delivered. Read. 3 hours passed before my mother responded. "Glad you're fine. Enjoy your rest." 4 words. That's all I got. 4 words and a complete dismissal of what I'd just been through. The hospital social worker stopped by that afternoon. His name was Bernard. A tall man with a gentle voice and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He asked routine questions about my home situation, whether I had someone to help me during recovery. I tried to answer normally, tried to pretend everything was fine, but my voice kept breaking. He noticed. He pulled up a chair beside my bed and waited patiently until I could speak. I told him everything. The vacation I couldn't attend, the guilt they'd laid on me, the emergency surgery they'd ignored, the social media posts that made it clear where their priorities lay. Bernard's face went through several expressions as I talked, settling on something between professional concern and personal anger. "What you're describing," he said carefully, "is emotional neglect. It's a form of family dysfunction that's more common than people realize, but that doesn't make it acceptable." He gave me resources, phone numbers for therapists who specialized in family trauma, support groups for people dealing with toxic relatives. I took the papers but couldn't imagine actually using them. They were my family. Surely this was just a misunderstanding, a temporary rift that would heal once they came home. Nurse Rosa became my lifeline during those first 2 days in the hospital. She wasn't assigned to me for every shift, but she checked on me anyway, bringing extra pudding cups and sitting with me during the lonely evening hours when the hospital got quiet and I had nothing to do but stare at my phone. She told me about her own family drama, a sister who'd stolen money from her, and parents who'd sided with the thief. "Sometimes," she said as she adjusted my pillows, "the people who share your blood cause the deepest wounds. But that also means you get to choose who your real family is. The people who show up, who care, who hold your hand through the hard stuff. Those are your real people." I thought about that a lot during those long nights. The nights were the worst. Pain medication wore off faster when I was lying in the dark, every slight movement sending jolts through my abdomen. The IV in my arm was uncomfortable. The hospital sounds were unfamiliar and unsettling. But worse than all of that was watching my phone light up with family updates while I lay there alone. Claire posted an Instagram story with a montage of vacation clips set to upbeat music. The text overlay read, "Family is everything." I watched it 3 times, looking for any acknowledgement that I existed, that I was part of this family she claimed was everything. I wasn't in a single frame. It was like it'd been erased. My mother shared the story to her own account with added commentary about how blessed she was to have such a wonderful family. Nathan posted photos from a sunset cruise, the 4 of them clinking champagne glasses. My father's caption, "Making memories that will last forever, forever memories that didn't include me." I put my phone face down on the rolling tray beside my bed and cried as quietly as I could manage. In the bed across from me, an elderly woman named Dorothy watched with sad eyes. When the nurse left, Dorothy called over to me softly. "Honey," she said, "I've been here for 3 days. I've seen a lot of patients come and go. You know what I haven't seen? Anyone visiting you. No flowers, no balloons, no family. That's not right. A sweet girl like you should have people here." I tried to smile, tried to brush it off, but Dorothy wasn't having it. "Whatever they did to make you feel like you don't deserve support," she said firmly, "they were wrong." You remember that. On day 2 post-surgery, my doctor came by with the discharge paperwork. Everything looked good, he explained. The surgery was successful, the infection was clearing up with antibiotics, and I could go home as long as I had someone to stay with me for at least 48 hours. It was standard protocol after abdominal surgery. Someone needed to be there in case of complications, to help with basic tasks, to make sure I didn't push myself too hard too fast. I opened my mouth to say, yes, of course, I had someone, but the lie died in my throat. The doctor waited patiently. I tried calling my cousin Maxine again, reaching her this time, but she was drowning with newborn twins and her voice was so exhausted I couldn't bring myself to ask. My colleague Derek offered awkwardly when I called him in desperation, but I heard his wife in the background firmly shutting that down. Mira's phone was still going to voicemail. She must have been somewhere with no service. I had no one. The doctor made a note in my chart. Well, keep you another day or two, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Insurance will cover one more day under these circumstances. After that, well, reassess. The humiliation of that moment, having to explain to medical staff over and over that no, I didn't have family support, no, there was no one who could stay with me, burned hotter than my surgical incision. The knowing looks from nurses, the pitying glances from other patients who had rooms full of visitors, made me want to disappear. Meanwhile, my family posted about their expensive resort dinners, their helicopter tour of the island, their private snorkeling excursion. My sister's designer beach bag probably cost more than my daily hospital bills. My brother's new GoPro setup for his underwater videos definitely did. My parents were staying in a suite that ran $500 a night. They had money for all of that. But not one of them thought to cut the vacation short to check on me. Not one of them considered that maybe, just maybe, their daughter and sister lying alone in a hospital bed after emergency surgery might need them more than they needed another Mai Tai at sunset. I was finally discharged on day 4, insurance maxed out, hospital ready to free up the bed. I took another Uber home, holding my abdomen carefully as we went over bumps, trying not to wince visibly. My apartment looked exactly as Id left it 4 days earlier when Id stumbled out in the middle of the night thinking I might be dying. The coffee cup still sat in the sink. My bed was unmade. Mail had piled up by the door. The silence was so heavy it felt like a physical presence. I shuffled to the couch, every movement painful, and lowered myself down with a grimace. I couldn't cook. I could barely walk to the bathroom. I ordered soup delivery and waited, scrolling through my phone because I apparently enjoyed torturing myself. The family chat showed new photos. They were at the airport, heading home. Claire had posted a group shot, all 4 of them with tans and relaxed smiles. Sad to leave paradise, but so grateful for this time together. Not one mention of checking on me. Not one question about how I was managing. It was as if I didn't exist at all. My family landed back in the States 2 days after I'd been discharged from the hospital. I know because I watched their arrival photos appear on social media, watched them document their return to reality after paradise. Home sweet home, my mother posted, with a picture of their luggage in the entryway, but not a word to me. Not a text, not a call, nothing. 24 hours of silence stretched into agony. I kept picking up my phone, putting it down, picking it up again. Should I reach out first? Should I wait for them to contact me? The uncertainty made my stomach hurt worse than my healing incision. Finally, my mother sent a text. Home safe. Hope you're recovered. That was it. 7 words after Eid nearly died from a ruptured appendix. I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I called her. My hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice carrying that particular tone of annoyance she reserved for interruptions. Juliet, in the middle of unpacking. Can this wait? Something inside me cracked. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need help. I can't lift anything. I'm still recovering. I need someone to come over, maybe help me with groceries, or just check on me. The sigh that came through the phone was long and theatrical. Juliet, she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a particularly dim child. You had your surgery days ago. You should be fine by now. You're being needy. I felt like Shed slapped me through the phone. Needy? I repeated. Mom, it was a ruptured appendix. The doctor said it's a serious surgery. I almost developed sepsis. She made a dismissive sound. People bounce back from surgery all the time. My friend Patricia had her appendix out, and she was back at work in a week. Maybe you're just milking this for attention because you're upset about missing the vacation. The words hit me like physical blows. Milking it? I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. I almost died. I was alone in the hospital. Nobody even called to see if I survived the surgery. There was a pause, and then her voice turned cold. Don't be so dramatic. If it was that serious, they wouldn't have let you go home. You're always exaggerating everything. I tried again, desperate for her to understand. Mom, they only released me because I had no one to help me. I had to stay extra days in the hospital because you were all gone. The bitterness in her laugh made my chest tighten. Well, what did you expect us to do? Fly home and ruin everyone's vacation? We'd been planning that trip for months. We're not going to drop everything because you had a routine medical procedure. But it wasn't routine, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. My appendix ruptured. It was life-threatening. She cut me off. You made your choice when you picked work over family. You chose not to come on the vacation. You don't get to complain now that we didn't drop everything when you had a problem. That's not how this works. You're an adult. You need to handle your own life without expecting everyone else to revolve around you. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. The gaslighting was so complete, so thorough, that for a moment I actually questioned myself. Was I being dramatic? Was I expecting too much? She didn't give me time to formulate a response. I have to finish unpacking, she said briskly. Your father and I have dinner plans tonight. Take care of yourself, Juliet. Try not to be so needy all the time. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling like I'd stepped into an alternate universe where nothing made sense anymore. I called Claire next, hoping maybe my sister would be different, would understand, would show some basic human compassion. She answered with an exasperated what, as if I was bothering her by existing. Claire, I said, can we please talk? I'm really hurt that nobody checked on me after my surgery. I was scared and alone and I needed my family. She laughed, a sharp sound without humor. You're hurt? Are you kidding me right now? Do you have any idea how awkward it was trying to explain to everyone at the resort why you weren't there? Aunt Beverly texted me like 5 times asking if we were in a fight. The couple we met on the snorkeling trip kept asking where our other family member was. It was embarrassing, Juliet. But I couldn't come because of work, I started to say. She interrupted, her voice rising. Because you chose work. You made that decision. And now you want sympathy? You want us to feel bad for you? You made your choice and we made ours. We decided to enjoy our vacation instead of letting you ruin it from thousands of miles away. I felt tears starting but forced them back. Claire, I had emergency surgery. My appendix ruptured. I could have died. I was alone in the hospital, and nobody even called. So what? She snapped. What were we supposed to do from Hawaii? Hold your hand through the phone? You were in a hospital. That's literally what hospitals are for. They took care of you. You're fine now, right? Then what's the problem? The problem is that you're my sister, I said, my voice breaking. I needed you. I needed my family. And you all just kept posting vacation photos like I didn't matter at all. Claire's voice went ice cold. You know what? You're so selfish. Everything always has to be about you, doesn't it? We finally get one nice family trip. 1 week where we can just relax and bond, and you can't even let us have that. You have to create drama and make yourself the victim. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with your constant need for attention. Grow up, Juliet. She hung up. I tried Nathan last, my hands shaking so hard I could barely dial. He was my little brother. We'd been close growing up. Surely he would be different, would show some empathy. He answered on the second ring, sounding distracted. Hey, what's up? Nathan, I said, my voice small and tired. Can we talk about what happened? About the surgery? He sighed. Look, Jules. I already told you. The timing sucked, I get it, but we couldn't do anything from Hawaii. You're okay now, right? The surgery went fine? Then let's just move on. I don't understand why you're making this such a big deal. Because I almost died, I said, the words coming out as barely more than a whisper. Because I was alone and terrified, and I called you and you were at a bar, and you told me you were in the middle of something. Another sigh. I mean, yeah, it was bad timing, but what did you want me to do? Sit in the hotel room and worry? That wouldn't have helped you. The doctors handled it. You're fine. Can we please just drop this and move forward? Move forward, he said. Like my near-death experience was a minor inconvenience to be swept under the rug. I realized in that moment that they had made a collective decision, whether consciously or not, to rewrite what had happened. In their version of events, I was being overly dramatic about a routine surgery. I was guilt-tripping them for enjoying their vacation. I was the problem, not their complete abandonment of me in a medical emergency. The gaslighting was so complete, so unified across all of them, that I began to doubt my own perception of reality. Was I overreacting? Was I being too needy? Should I just accept their version and move on? But then I looked down at my surgical scar, still fresh and angry-looking, and I remembered lying alone in that pre-op room, calling for my family and getting nothing but voicemails and dismissals. I remembered the kindness of strangers, Nurse Rosa and social worker Bernard, who had shown me more compassion than my own blood relatives. And I knew, deep in my bones, that what they had done to me was wrong, that their attempt to reframe it as my fault was abuse. But knowing it and being able to stand up against it were two very different things. 1 week after my surgery, my father called. His voice was formal, almost businesslike. "We need to have a family meeting," he said without preamble. "Clear the air, get everyone on the same page. Can you come to the house tonight?" Despite every instinct screaming at me not to go, I agreed. Some pathetic part of me still hoped this meeting would be where they apologized, where they acknowledged what they'd done, where we could start healing. I was wrong. So painfully, devastatingly wrong. I drove to my parents' house that evening, still moving carefully, my abdomen tender and sore. Every breath hurt. Every turn of the steering wheel sent twinges through my healing incision. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Through the window, I could see them all inside, sitting in the living room. Together, united. I should have recognized the setup for what it was. When I walked in, nobody stood up to greet me. Nobody asked how I was feeling. The air in the room was thick with tension. Claire was on the couch, arms crossed. Nathan sat in the armchair, looking uncomfortable. My parents stood together by the fireplace, presenting a united front. "Sit down, Juliet," my father said, gesturing to the one empty chair. It felt like walking into an ambush. I sat, my body rigid with anxiety. My father cleared his throat. "We need to talk about your behavior over the past week. Your attitude toward this family has been unacceptable." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "My behavior? My attitude?" "Yes," my mother said, stepping forward. "You've been making everyone feel guilty about the vacation. The texts, the phone calls, the constant need for reassurance. It's exhausting, Juliet. We can't keep catering to your emotional neediness." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "I asked for help once because I couldn't lift groceries after major surgery." Claire made a sound of disgust. "Once? You texted me 3 times in 2 days asking me to bring you things. I have my own life. I can't drop everything to be your personal assistant." "But I couldn't drive," I said, looking around the room for someone who would understand. "I had surgery. I couldn't do basic things." Nathan leaned forward, his voice patient but condescending. "You could have ordered delivery. You could have figured it out. Why did it have to be our problem? Everything is always about what you need, what you want, what you're going through. It gets old." I stared at him. This person who I'd grown up with, who I'd thought I knew. When did basic human compassion become too much to ask? My father took control of the conversation. His voice measured and calm in that way that made you feel crazy for being upset. "The truth is, Juliet, you've always had trouble with jealousy when it comes to our family closeness. You keep yourself separate, you prioritize work over us, and then you resent us for being close to each other." "Jealous?" I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. I'm part of this family. How can I be jealous of something I'm supposed to be included in? My mother's laugh was harsh. Are you, though? Part of this family? You missed the most important trip we've planned in years. You're always choosing your career over us. And now you're playing victim because we went ahead and enjoyed ourselves without you. The words were like knives. Each one found a tender spot and twisted. Claire piled on. And now you're using your surgery as some kind of weapon. Making us feel bad for having a good time. Making everything about you, like always. I tried to defend myself, but they talked over me, their voices rising in a coordinated chorus of accusations. You're too sensitive. You twist things. You make everything dramatic. You have a victim mentality. The gaslighting was relentless, overwhelming. Every point I tried to make was immediately dismissed or reframed as evidence of my dysfunction. My mother delivered what she clearly thought was a compassionate suggestion. We think you need therapy, Juliet. Serious therapy. You have some deep-seated need for attention that's not healthy. Your father and I have been talking, and we're genuinely worried about you. This constant drama. This need to be the center of attention. I felt like I was losing my mind. I had emergency surgery, I said, hearing the desperation in my voice. I almost died. I asked for basic support. How is that being dramatic? Nathan shook his head. But you didn't die. You're fine. That's the point. You keep saying you almost died like you want us to feel guilty, but the fact is you had a standard medical procedure and recovered. Why are you so determined to milk this? My father nodded in agreement. We were on a vacation wed planned for months, that wed all paid significant money for. We couldn't just abandon that because you had an appendicitis. It's unfortunate timing, but that's life. You handle it and move on. You don't try to make everyone else responsible for your problems. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I looked at each of their faces, searching for any crack in the united front, any hint that someone understood how cruel this was. There was nothing. They had decided on their narrative and they were sticking to it. I was the problem. I was the broken one. I was the one who needed to change. Then Claire delivered the killing blow. She leaned forward, her eyes cold and hard. Honestly, Juliet, we had a better time without you there. No drama, no complaining, no walking on eggshells wondering if you were going to get upset about something. It was just us, enjoying each other's company, laughing and relaxing without all your negative energy bringing us down. The silence that followed was deafening. I waited for someone to tell her that was too far, to defend me, to say something that indicated I mattered to them. My mother looked away. My father examined his fingernails. Nathan stared at the floor. Nobody contradicted her. Nobody said, Juliet, we're glad you're okay, or we love you, or of course we want you in the family. Their silence was the loudest answer I'd ever received. I stood up slowly, every movement careful because my body was still healing from the surgery they were all pretending wasn't serious. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet, but steady. You're right, I said. I won't bother you anymore. I walked to the door, half hoping someone would stop me, would realize they'd gone too far, would call me back. I opened the door and stepped outside. Behind me, I heard them start talking again, their voices light and relieved, as if my exit had lifted a burden. I drove home on autopilot, tears streaming down my face so heavily I had to pull over twice because I couldn't see the road. When I finally made it to my apartment, I collapsed on the couch and cried until I had nothing left. The physical wound from my surgery was healing, sealed with dissolvable stitches and covered with sterile bandages. But the emotional wound my family had just inflicted went so much deeper than any surgeon's scalpel could reach. They had looked me in the eye, the person who had almost died alone while they sipped drinks on a beach, and told me I was the problem. And in that moment, something fundamental broke inside me. The part of me that had kept trying to earn their love, kept making excuses for their behavior, kept believing family meant something, finally died. It hurt worse than ruptured appendix ever had. Mira came back from her trip 3 days after the nightmare family meeting. She showed up at my door with her usual knock, a rhythmic pattern we'd established years ago. I opened it and she took one look at my face and pushed inside. What happened? She demanded, dropping her bags. When I didn't answer immediately, She guided me to the couch and sat beside me. "Talk to me, Jules." I told her everything. The emergency surgery, the abandoned phone calls, the beach photos while I was in the operating room, the dismissive texts, the family meeting where they'd told me I was dramatic and needy and the problem. The words poured out of me in a torrent. All the pain and confusion and hurt I'd been holding inside. Mira's face went through a series of transformations as I talked, from concern to shock to pure fury. By the time I finished, her hands were clenched into fists. "What the actual hell?" she said, her voice shaking with anger. "They did what?" "Mira?" I said weakly. "Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe they're right, and I'm just too sensitive." "No," she said firmly, cutting me off. "No. Listen to me very carefully. What you're describing is not normal family behavior. This is emotional abuse. This is neglect. This is gaslighting. You had life-threatening surgery, and your family couldn't be bothered to call and check if you survived. That is not okay. That is never okay." But I tried to argue. They said I could have ordered delivery, that I didn't need them to drop everything, that the surgery wasn't that serious. Mira grabbed my shoulders gently, looking me straight in the eye. "Juliet, your appendix ruptured. Do you understand how dangerous that is? People die from that. You were alone in a hospital, scared and in pain, and you called your family for support. That's normal. That's healthy. You know what's not normal? Ignoring those calls so you can enjoy Mai Tais. That's sick." For the first time since the surgery, someone was validating what I'd felt all along. The relief was so overwhelming, I started crying again. Mira held me while I sobbed, rubbing my back and making soothing sounds. When I'd cried myself out, she pulled back and started asking questions. Questions I hadn't even thought to ask myself. "Did they ever apologize?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "Did they visit you after they got home?" "No." "Did they ask how the surgery went?" "No." "Did they offer any help during your recovery?" "No." "Did they acknowledge that you almost died?" "No." Mira's expression grew darker with each answer. Her phone came out and she held it toward me. "Show me the texts," she said. "Show me everything." I hesitated, but something in her fierce expression made me comply. I pulled up my message history with my family. The desperate texts I'd sent from the emergency room. "In hospital. Need surgery. Scared." My mother's response hours later. "Can't talk now." My text during recovery. "Surgery went okay. Feeling awful. Wish you were here." Her response. "Glad you're fine. Enjoy your rest." Mira's jaw literally dropped. Then I showed her the family group chat activity during that same time period. The beach sunset photos, the luau pictures, the surfing videos, the captions about perfect family time. Mira looked like she might throw my phone across the room. "This is," she started, then stopped, searching for words. "This is evidence of neglect, Juliet. This is documentation of them choosing to ignore a medical emergency. People need to see this." "Evidence?" I said, confused. "For what?" Mira's eyes were blazing. "I don't know yet. But your family is rewriting history. They're making you the villain in a story where you almost died. The truth needs to come out." I shook my head violently. "I can't publicly shame my family. I can't do that." Mira set my phone down carefully. "They've isolated you, gaslit you, abandoned you during a medical emergency, and then blamed you for being upset about it. Why do they get to control the narrative?" I didn't have an answer. The idea of exposing what happened felt terrifying and wrong and disloyal, even after everything they'd done. But Mira wasn't done. She pulled out her own phone and made a call. I listened as she spoke to someone named Rosa. My nurse Rosa. Apparently, Mira had called the hospital and gotten her contact information, explaining she was my friend and I needed support. Rosa had given Mira her personal number and told her to have me call any time. I'd completely forgotten that Rosa had written her number on a paper towel and tucked it into my discharge papers. Mira handed me her phone. "Rosa wants to talk to you." I took it with shaking hands. "Honey," Rosa's warm voice came through. "How are you doing?" I broke down again, telling her about the family meeting, the accusations, the way they'd made me feel crazy for expecting basic human decency. Rosa listened without interrupting. And when I finished, She said something that changed everything. Honey, I've been a nurse for 23 years. I've seen thousands of patients go through surgery. What your family did is not normal. Patients with no family support statistically have better outcomes than patients with toxic families who actively harm their mental health. Your family is toxic. What they did to you was wrong. Not just a little wrong. Deeply, seriously wrong. She paused, then added, if you need documentation of what happened, of your hospital stay, of the fact that you had no visitors and no support system, I can provide that. Medical records show everything. You weren't being dramatic. You were legitimately alone through a life-threatening emergency. I thanked her, my voice shaky, and handed the phone back to Mira. Something was shifting inside me. The fog of gaslighting was starting to clear. Mira spent the next hour helping me document everything. We took screenshots of every text message, every social media post, every piece of communication. We created a timeline. Day 1. Vacation starts. Day 3. First symptoms. Day 4. Emergency room at 3 a.m. Day 4. Surgery while family posts beach photos. Day 5. Recovery while family posts luau pictures. Day 6. Discharge with no support while family posts snorkeling videos. Day 7. Family returns home. Day 8. Dismissive text from mother. Day 9. Gaslighting phone calls. Day 10. Family meeting where they blamed me. Laid out like that, the evidence was damning. This wasn't a misunderstanding or bad communication. This was a pattern of deliberate cruelty and systematic abandonment. Mira looked at the timeline Wed created and shook her head in disbelief. This is abuse, she said quietly. You know that, right? This is documented emotional abuse and neglect. I'm not saying you have to do anything with this evidence, but you need to see it clearly. You need to understand that you're not crazy. You didn't imagine this. They really did abandon you. And then they tried to convince you that you deserved it. I stared at the screen, at the incontrovertible proof of what my family had done. Part of me still wanted to make excuses for them, to find some way to explain their behavior that made it less monstrous. But the evidence wouldn't allow it. The timeline was clear. While I was fighting for my life, they were choosing to ignore me. And then they'd punished me for being hurt about it. Mira squeezed my hand. You don't have to decide anything right now, she said gently. But I want you to know that you have options. You have proof. You have people who believe you and support you. You're not alone anymore. For the first time in weeks, I believed her. 2 weeks after the surgery, reality hit me in the form of medical bills. They arrived in a steady stream, white envelopes with hospital logos and amounts that made my heart sink. The first one was from the hospital itself. $7,321 after insurance. I stared at the number, trying to comprehend it. Then came the surgeon's bill. $2,800. The anesthesiologist wanted $1,200. The emergency room had additional charges for $1,500. Various tests and procedures added another $900. I sat on my couch surrounded by bills, doing math in my head that made me feel physically sick. $12,821. I didn't have that kind of money. My savings account had maybe $3,000. It just paid $2,500 for a vacation I didn't get to take. The vacation. My family still had my money. I picked up my phone and texted my father. I need to talk about the vacation money I paid. With these medical bills, I really need it back. The response came faster than I expected. He called me, his voice already defensive before Id even said hello. That money is gone, he said flatly. We used it for the trip. We budgeted based on 5 people contributing. We can't just give you money we don't have. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. I didn't go on the trip. I was here having emergency surgery. I should get my money refunded. He made an exasperated sound. We explained this already. Everything was booked based on your contribution. The resort charged us per person. The rental car was more expensive for a larger vehicle. The activities were group rated. Your money went into all of that. It's not like we have it sitting in an account somewhere. I took a deep breath. I have almost $13,000 in medical debt, I said quietly. I'm asking my family for help. I'm asking you to return money I paid for something I didn't use because I had a medical emergency. You can't seriously expect us to pay your medical bills, he said, and his tone was incredulous, like Id asked for something completely unreasonable. Those are your responsibility. Your mother and I taught you about financial responsibility. This is part of being an adult. But you have my money, I said, feeling desperation creep into my voice. $2,500 that I paid for a trip I didn't take because my appendix ruptured. Please, Dad. I really need it. He was quiet for a moment, then his voice came back harder. You could have come on the trip. You chose not to. That's not our fault. We're not responsible for your choices or your medical expenses. Get a payment plan. That's what responsible adults do instead of trying to guilt family members into bailing them out. I heard my mother's voice in the background, then she was on the phone, clearly having been listening the whole time. Honestly, Juliet, if you managed your money better, you wouldn't be in this situation. We offered to help you set up a budget last year and you said you had it handled. Well, clearly you don't. Now you want us to fix your problems. That's not how the real world works. I felt like I was in a nightmare. Mom, I said, my voice shaking, I almost died. I'm asking for help from my family. That's not unreasonable. That's what families do. She made a dismissive sound. Families also don't emotionally blackmail each other. You're using this surgery to manipulate us, and it's not going to work. Your father and I worked hard for our money. We're not just handing it over because you made poor financial decisions. But it's my money, I said, almost shouting now. I paid it for the vacation. I didn't use the vacation. It should be mine. Your father already explained that the money was used, she said coldly. It's gone. You need to move on and figure out your own financial situation. We're done discussing this, she hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the pile of medical bills on my coffee table. Then my phone buzzed with texts. Claire, Nathan, both chiming in like they'd been waiting for their cue. From Claire, stop harassing Mom and Dad for money. It's embarrassing. We all have expenses. Figure yours out without begging. From Nathan, you make good money at your job. Use it. Stop trying to guilt trip everyone because you have bills to pay. Welcome to adulthood. I looked at their social media. Claire had posted photos from yesterday, showing off a new designer purse. The bag cost $1,200 according to the brand tag visible in the photo. Nathan had shared his new gaming setup, a top-of-the-line PC and accessories that I knew ran at least $2,500. My parents had posted about booking a luxury spa weekend for the following month. They had money. They were spending money. They just didn't want to help me. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I made one last desperate attempt. I sent a message to the family group chat, the one had been added back to at some point, though I wasn't sure when. I'm asking for help. I'm your daughter, your sister. I almost died and I am drowning in medical debt. Please, just give me back the vacation money I paid. Please help me. The responses came quickly, like they'd been scripted. From Claire, stop playing victim. From Nathan, get a second job. From my mother, we raised you better than to beg. From my father, this conversation is over. Then a notification. Someone had removed me from the family group chat. Again. I stared at my phone in disbelief. They'd collectively decided I wasn't worth $2,500. I wasn't worth helping. I wasn't worth keeping in the family chat. The message was clear. I was completely on my own. Mira found me an hour later, surrounded by bills and empty ice cream containers, crying so hard I was hiccuping. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me and let me cry. When I could finally speak, I showed her the texts, the bills, the calculations of how deeply in debt I was. Her face went through now familiar stages of shock and fury. That's it, she said quietly, her voice deadly calm. That's it. The world needs to know who these people really are. I looked at her, tears still streaming down my face. What do you mean? She pulled out her laptop. We're going to tell your story, she said. Anonymously if you want. But people need to know what happened. Not for revenge. For truth. Because your family is out there pretending to be perfect, and meanwhile they abandoned you, gaslit you, and are now refusing to help you with medical debt while they buy designer bags and plan spa weekends. That's not okay. That's not a private family matter. That's abuse. and it needs to be exposed. Every fiber of my being said this was wrong. That you don't air family business. That good daughters don't betray their families like this. But then I looked at the bills. I looked at the texts. I looked at the evidence of their cruelty laid out in black and white. And I thought about how they'd made me feel crazy for expecting basic human decency, how they'd punished me for almost dying, how they were now financially abandoning me while living in luxury. And something in me hardened. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, let's do it. Mira opened her laptop and pulled up Reddit. There's a forum for family drama, she said. Lots of people share their stories. It's supportive. And if you post anonymously, no one has to know it's you. We can blur out names and identifying details. I nodded slowly. Together, we began to write my story. Every detail, every text, every moment of abandonment and cruelty. The truth, laid bare for the world to see. I had no idea what I was about to unleash. Mira helped me craft the post carefully. We chose a popular family relationships forum on Reddit, a place where thousands of people shared their stories and sought advice. The title almost wrote itself. My family chose vacation over my life-threatening emergency surgery. Then the story poured out. I wrote about the vacation planning, my work conflict, their cold shoulders when I couldn't come. I wrote about waking up at 3 a.m. with a ruptured appendix, calling every family member and getting voicemail. I wrote about the surgery, about lying alone in pre-op terrified I might die, about Nathan answering from a beach bar and telling me he was in the middle of something. I included the timeline, the screenshots with names carefully blurred out, the social media posts of beach sunsets while I was in the operating room. I wrote about the gaslighting, the family meeting where they told me I was the problem, the refusal to return my vacation money while I drowned in medical debt. Mira had gotten permission from Nurse Rosa and social worker Bernard to include their professional observations, also anonymized. A hospital nurse confirmed I had no visitors during a 4-day stay after life-threatening surgery. A social worker confirmed I had to stay extra days due to lack of support system. The evidence was irrefutable. We read through it 3 times, checking that no identifying details remained. Then, with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick, I hit post. It was 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. I expected maybe a few responses by morning. I closed my laptop, took a sleeping pill Mira had brought me, and tried to sleep. When I woke up 8 hours later, my phone was exploding. I had 67 notifications from Reddit. Confused and still groggy, I opened the app. My post had 27,000 upvotes. I blinked, certain I was misreading. 27,000. The comments section had over 6,000 responses. I started scrolling, my hands shaking. This is emotional abuse. Your family is toxic beyond belief. They literally chose drinks over your life. I'm so sorry you went through this alone. The gaslighting is textbook narcissistic behavior. OP, you need to cut these people off permanently. Mental health professionals were commenting, explaining family scapegoat dynamics. Financial experts were saying that keeping my vacation money might be legally actionable. Medical professionals shared horror stories of patients with no support, validating how serious ruptured appendixes are. The support was overwhelming. But it wasn't just on Reddit anymore. Someone had cross-posted it to 12 other forums. Screenshots were circulating on Twitter. TikTok creators were making videos analyzing the family dynamics. A YouTube channel with 3 million subscribers had made a video breaking down the timeline with all the receipts ID provided. My story was going viral. I sat frozen on my couch, watching in real time as my family's cruelty was exposed to hundreds of thousands of people. The hashtags started appearing. Someone created "Family is not everything." Another was "Toxic family awareness." People were sharing their own stories of family abandonment in the comments. Thousands of people who'd felt alone in their pain, suddenly realizing they weren't crazy, weren't overdramatic, weren't the problem. My story had given them permission to name what had happened to them. Meanwhile, my family had no idea. They didn't use Reddit. They weren't on the corners of Twitter or TikTok where this was spreading. But other people in their lives did. My phone rang. It was Aunt Beverly, my father's sister. "Juliet," she said, her voice shaking, "is the story about the Hawaii vacation about you?" My stomach dropped. I started, but she cut me off. I recognized the details, the timing, the resort. Oh, honey, I had no idea. Your parents told us you couldn't come because you didn't want to spend time with family. They said you'd chosen to work through the vacation on purpose. I had no idea you had emergency surgery. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because they didn't care, I said quietly, the words finally feeling true. Aunt Beverly was crying. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have come. I would have been there. Do you need help now? Can I do anything? The floodgates opened. Cousin Maxine called. Uncle George called. Family friends started reaching out. Everyone had the same story. My parents had lied to them. Told them I'd skipped the vacation voluntarily, that I was being difficult, that I'd caused drama. No one had known about the surgery, and now that they knew the truth, they were horrified. Uncle George was particularly angry. Had loaned my father $5,000 for the vacation. Roland had told him it was for a family emergency, that they needed help affording to take everyone. Now George realized that money had funded a luxury vacation while they abandoned me during actual emergency. He demanded his money back and sent $1,000 to me without me asking. But while extended family rallied around me, my immediate family was about to discover what had happened. My mother's best friend from church saw the story shared in a Facebook group. She recognized enough details to call my mother. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. My father first, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you?" he said without greeting. "How dare you air our private business to the entire internet? Take that post down right now." I felt surprisingly calm. "I didn't use anyone's names," I said. "Every detail I shared is true." "You had no right," he shouted. "You've humiliated this family. Everyone knows it's us. Take it down immediately or you're out of this family for good." "I'm already out," I said quietly. "You made that very clear." The line went dead. Then my mother called, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You've destroyed us!" she shrieked. "Our friends are asking questions. People at church are looking at us differently. You've ruined our reputation out of spite." "I told the truth," I said. "That's all I did." "The truth," she spat. "You twisted everything to make yourself look like a victim. You've always been manipulative. You've always needed attention, and now you've stooped to this." I hung up on her, a first in my life. Claire texted. "You're dead to me. You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy." Nathan sent. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own family. You're disgusting." But something unexpected was happening. The viral post wasn't just exposing my family. It was changing the narrative in their real life too. Extended family who'd been told lies were now confronting my parents. Church friends were asking uncomfortable questions. Their neighbors had seen the story. My father's colleagues at work were talking about it. The perfect family image they'd cultivated so carefully was crumbling. People were taking sides, and most weren't siding with them. Claire's friends started commenting on her social media. "The timing of your Hawaii posts matches the story that's viral. Did you really ignore your sister during emergency surgery?" Claire made her accounts private, but screenshots had already been taken. Nathan's girlfriend broke up with him. She sent me a message saying she couldn't be with someone capable of that kind of cruelty. My parents faced questions at church that Sunday. Several people approached them, asking if the story was true, if they'd really abandoned their daughter. My mother apparently left service early in tears. The social fallout was massive and swift. Their carefully constructed image of the perfect, close-knit family was revealed as a lie. Online, the conversation continued to grow. News outlets were requesting interviews. I declined all of them, wanting to remain anonymous. But the story had sparked something bigger. Thousands of people were sharing their own experiences with toxic families. A movement was building around the idea that family isn't everything. That blood relation doesn't excuse abuse. That it's okay to walk away from people who harm you. I read through comments for hours, crying at the messages from people who felt seen for the first time. "Thank you for sharing. I thought I was crazy too. Your family's behavior is abuse. You deserved so much better. You're not alone anymore." One comment stuck with me. It was from a therapist who specialized in family trauma. "What you experienced is called systematic scapegoating. One family member is designated as the problem so the others can maintain their dysfunction. Your story will help thousands of people recognize this pattern in their own families. You've done something incredibly brave. For the first time since my surgery, I didn't feel alone. The virtual support from strangers was overwhelming. People started a GoFundMe without my permission, raising money for my medical bills. It hit the target of $13,000 in 18 hours, then kept going. By the end of the week, strangers had raised $18,000, more than enough to pay my bills with some left over for therapy and recovery costs. My family's response to the viral post and the public support I received was to double down. They never apologized, never acknowledged what they'd done. Instead, they tried to control the narrative in their immediate circles, claiming I'd exaggerated, that I'd always been dramatic, that they were the real victims of my betrayal. But too many people had seen the evidence. The timeline didn't lie. The screenshots didn't lie. The professional statements from my nurse and social worker didn't lie. My family had shown the world exactly who they were, and no amount of spin could change that. 3 months after I posted my story, they were still dealing with the consequences. Their reputation in their community was permanently damaged. Extended family had cut ties. Friends had distanced themselves. And I was building a new life, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. The viral post hadn't just exposed them. It had freed me from ever having to doubt my reality again. 3 months after my story went viral, my life looked completely different. I sat in a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by people who'd become my chosen family. Mira was there, of course, making everyone laugh with a story about her disastrous attempt at baking. Nurse Rosa had become a real friend, meeting me for lunch once a week to check on my recovery. Social worker Bernard joined us occasionally, along with 3 women I'd met through the online support group that formed after my post. We called ourselves the Survivors Club, only half joking. These people, most of whom I'd known for less than 3 months, had shown me more genuine love and support than my blood family had in 32 years. The medical bills were paid, thanks to the incredible generosity of strangers who'd donated to the GoFundMe. I'd tried to stop the fundraiser once it hit my target, but people kept giving. The extra money went into a savings account I was using to pay for therapy. Therapy had been life-changing. My therapist, Dr. Reeves, was a specialist in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. In our first session, Shed listened to my story and said something that made me cry with relief. What you experienced is called systematic scapegoating within a narcissistic family structure. You were designated as the problem child so the others could avoid examining their own dysfunction. This is a recognized pattern of abuse. You're not crazy. You didn't imagine it. What they did to you was real, and it was wrong. Those words, that validation from a professional, helped me start to heal. We worked on unpacking years of conditioning, identifying the ways I'd been taught to accept unacceptable behavior, learning to trust my own perception of reality. Dr. Reeves helped me see that the vacation incident wasn't an isolated event, but the culmination of a lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle abuse. I'd always been the scapegoat. I just hadn't had the language to name it. My physical recovery had been complete for weeks now. The surgical scar on my abdomen had faded to a thin pink line, barely noticeable unless I pointed it out, but the emotional scars took longer to heal. I still had nightmares sometimes, dreams where I was back in that hospital bed calling for my family and getting silence. I still felt a twist of anxiety when my phone rang, conditioned to expect criticism or demands. But slowly, with therapy and support, I was reclaiming myself. The person I'd been before, the one who'd apologized for needing love, who'd made herself small to avoid conflict, who'd accepted crumbs of affection and called it family, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who refused to settle for less than genuine care and respect. At work, my boss Garrett had surprised me by being incredibly understanding once he learned what had happened. Someone had sent him the viral post, recognizing details about the work presentation. Head called me into his office, and I'd braced for criticism. Instead, Head apologized. "I pushed you too hard," he said. "I didn't know your family situation, but that's no excuse. From now on, if you have a family emergency, Real emergency, you take whatever time you need. Jobs matter, but not more than your well-being. Extended family had become surprisingly supportive. Aunt Beverly called me every Sunday, just to chat and check in. Shed sent a care package with homemade cookies and a note that said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you from them. I should have seen what was happening." Cousin Maxine, despite being overwhelmed with twins, had driven 2 hours to visit me, bringing food and company and the kind of easy acceptance I'd always craved from my immediate family. Uncle George had been furious on my behalf, telling anyone who'd listen that his brother Roland was a disgrace. These relatives, who I'd always considered peripheral to my life, had stepped up in ways my parents and siblings never had. They'd proven that sharing blood wasn't enough. You had to actually care about each other. You had to show up. 4 months after the surgery, my parents reached out. Not with an apology, but with a demand. The email came from my father's account, clearly written by both of them based on the tone shifts. "We need you to post a retraction," it read. "This situation has gotten out of hand. People in our community have turned against us based on your exaggerated version of events. You need to publicly state that you were overly emotional and that you misrepresented what happened. You need to fix what you broke." I read it 3 times, feeling remarkably calm. A few months ago, this email would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Now, I saw it clearly for what it was. Another attempt at manipulation. Another refusal to take responsibility. Another demand that I sacrifice my well-being for their comfort. I replied with a single paragraph. I broke nothing. I told the truth. If the truth destroyed your reputation, that's the consequence of your actions, not mine. I needed my family when I almost died. You chose vacation. You chose cruelty. You chose to gaslight me instead of supporting me. I'm done begging for scraps of affection from people who see me as disposable. Lose my number. I hit send, then blocked both their email addresses and phone numbers. The finality of it was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I blocked Claire and Nathan too. There was nothing left to say to any of them. Claire made one last attempt 2 weeks later, showing up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking uncomfortable and defiant at the same time. "We need to talk," she said without greeting. "Mom and Dad are devastated. The whole family is falling apart. You need to forgive us and move on so we can fix this." I stood in the doorway, not inviting her in. "I have moved on," I said quietly. "Without you." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "We're your family," she said, like that explained everything. I shook my head. Family doesn't abandon each other during emergencies. Family doesn't gaslight and manipulate. Family doesn't keep money from someone drowning in medical debt while posting about luxury purchases. "You made mistakes," Claire started, but I cut her off. "They weren't mistakes. Mistakes are accidental. What you all did was deliberate. You chose, over and over, to be cruel. And when I called you out, you tried to make me think I was crazy for expecting basic human decency." Claire's face flushed. "We weren't perfect, but you didn't have to ruin our lives over it. You went nuclear. You exposed private family business to millions of people." "I didn't ruin your lives," I said, my voice steady and sure. "I revealed your character. There's a difference. Everything I shared was true. If the truth ruined your reputation, maybe examine why that is." She opened her mouth to argue, but I continued. "I survived surgery. I survived the infection. I survived being abandoned by every person who was supposed to love me. I'll survive without you too." I stepped back and closed the door gently but firmly. Through the wood, I heard her standing there for a long moment before finally walking away. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, but I felt no regret, only relief. The chapter with my biological family was closed. Now I could fully embrace the life I was building with people who actually deserved me. 6 months after the surgery, I sat in that same coffee shop with my chosen family, celebrating small victories. Mira had gotten a promotion. Rosa's daughter had just graduated college. Bernard had published a paper on supporting patients through family estrangement. I'd finished the first draft of a book about my experience, tentatively titled, "When Family Isn't, Surviving Abandonment and Finding Yourself." A small publisher had expressed interest. We laughed and talked and made plans for next weekend, for next month, for the future. At one point, Rosa squeezed my hand across the table. "Look at you," she said warmly. "You're thriving," and I realized she was right. I was thriving. Not just surviving, but actually building a life full of genuine connection and mutual support. The scar on my abdomen caught my eye as I reached for my coffee. I touched it lightly through my shirt. That scar reminded me that I'd survived something that could have killed me. But it was the invisible scars, the emotional wounds from my family's betrayal, that had taught me the harder lessons. I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or shared last names or DNA. It's defined by who shows up when you're at your lowest, who holds your hand when you're scared, who validates your pain instead of dismissing it, who celebrates your victories and mourns your losses, and stands beside you through the ordinary moments in between. I'd learned that being related to someone doesn't entitle them to hurt you, doesn't mean you owe them forgiveness, doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. I'd learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, to build a new life with people who actually see you and value you and love you not out of obligation but because they genuinely care. I almost died on an operating table, alone because my family chose vacation over my life. That loneliness, that abandonment, that betrayal, could have destroyed me. Instead, it taught me that I deserved better, that crumbs of affection weren't enough, that I didn't have to earn love through perfect behavior and endless forgiveness. The viral post that exposed my family had done more than just validate my experience. It had freed me from their narrative, given me permission to stop shrinking myself to fit their dysfunction, allowed me to stop apologizing for needing what every human being needs: connection, support, compassion, love. I closed my laptop where I'd been working on my book and looked around the table at the faces of people who'd chosen to be in my life. These were my people. This was my family. Not because we shared blood, but because we shared values, because we showed up for each other, because we created a space where everyone could be fully themselves, without fear of judgment or abandonment or cruelty. My phone buzzed with a notification. The support group I'd started online now had over 15,000 members, people from all over the world sharing their stories of surviving toxic families and building chosen families. I'd helped create a community where people didn't have to feel alone in their pain, where they could name what had happened to them without being gaslit, where they could find support and validation and hope. This wasn't the life I'd imagined 6 months ago when I was lying in that hospital bed, alone and abandoned, believing my family's narrative that I was too needy, too dramatic, too much. But it was a better life than I could have dreamed. A life built on truth instead of lies, on genuine connection instead of obligatory relation, on mutual respect instead of hierarchical control. The Hampton family had shown me exactly who they were: cold, cruel, self-centered people who valued their image more than their daughter's life, who chose comfort over compassion, who saw love as transactional and support as optional. I'd spent 32 years trying to earn their love, trying to be good enough, trying to understand why I never quite fit into their perfect family picture. Now I understood. I didn't fit because I wasn't the problem, they were. And understanding that, really accepting it deep in my bones, had set me free. As we left the coffee shop, walking out into the late afternoon sunshine, Mira threw her arm around my shoulders. "You know what?" she said. "I'm really proud of you." "For what?" I asked. "For choosing yourself," she said simply. "For refusing to accept their version of reality. For having the courage to tell your truth even when it was scary. For building this life, this community, this family. You're one of the strongest people I know." I leaned into her warmth, feeling grateful beyond words. If someone had told me 6 months ago, when I was at my lowest point, that I'd end up here, surrounded by love and support, financially stable, emotionally healing, building something meaningful from my pain, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I was, thriving. The final lesson I'd learned, the one I wanted to share with everyone who'd followed my story and found echoes of their own pain in it, was this: if you've ever been made to feel like you're too much, too needy, too dramatic, too sensitive, know this with absolute certainty: you're not. You're just surrounded by people who are too little empathy, too little love, too little humanity, too little capacity for genuine connection. You deserve people who show up. You deserve people who choose you, who fight for you, who stand beside you in the hard moments and celebrate with you in the good ones. And if your family of origin can't be that, can't give you what every human being deserves, then you have permission to find your people who can, because surviving isn't enough. You deserve to thrive. You deserve to live in a space where you're valued and seen and loved for exactly who you are. And sometimes, often really, thriving means leaving behind the people who only know how to watch you struggle, who feed on your pain, who need you to stay small so they can feel big. It means choosing yourself when no one else will. It means building something new from the ashes of what you thought family meant. It means redefining family on your own terms. And that's not betrayal. That's not cruelty. That's not being dramatic or vindictive or wrong. That's survival. That's health. That's choosing life over slow death by 1,000 small cruelties. 6 months after almost dying alone, I was finally, truly alive. And that was worth more than any perfect family photo could ever be. So let me ask you, have you ever felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever been made to feel crazy for expecting basic human decency? Have you questioned your reality because someone told you your pain wasn't valid? Drop your story in the comments below. You're not alone. There's an entire community here ready to support you, to believe you, to remind you that you deserve better. If this story resonated with you, if it helped you feel less alone in your own struggles, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about surviving family trauma and finding your strength. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not crazy, that they deserve love, that family isn't everything when that family is toxic. Thank you for being here, for listening, for being part of this community of survivors and fighters, and people who refuse to accept crumbs when they deserve a feast. I'm sending you all so much love and strength. Remember, you get to choose who your family is. Choose wisely. Choose people who choose you back. You deserve that, and so much more. Take care of yourselves out there. You're worthy of all the love and support in the world.